용 사와쳐버리스 용 시다게 네 노당 하고 된다 걸로 드는 뒤뒤와르스 또나 자말리 그 촉은 걸로 자손으로 되어 자소 오신래 추중 걸든 로도 더 나지 사제근도 아니 대진 대명 촉은 걸로 런던 뒤뒤와르스 런던데 아니 레식 자손으로 그래서 말বে 조선 동계 좋은 뒤에 받는 레바시비 자손이스 어디서
So this text, the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, is actually the root text for the Lam Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. And it is said that this is the most condensed way to encompass all of Buddha's teachings, whether it be Sutra or Tantra or Hinayana or Mahayana. It is said that all of the teachings of the Buddha can be condensed and found in the Lam Rim teachings. Excuse me. Very similar to an ocean. All rivers run into an ocean. Likewise, all Buddhist teachings run into the Lam Rim. So it's said that the Lam Rim is similar to an ocean in that all of the facets of Buddhism can be found within it.
어제 당아서 출 남비 줄로나 지가서 런던 로전 갈레가 런던 로전 제바이나 텔레 하비 로전 제무고 바나 그랬어 그 시다기 중데 아니 나가 제보 아니 템보 자치우시고 그랬어.
And if one can slowly study this text or become familiar with this text, the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, it's very 연주수로나 the tambo lapsari
다 중도 제가 템보요 템보요 뷰타보요 자치우요 사부요
becoming familiar with this text is very important because of the strength of this text, the importance of this text, and the vast qualities that this text has because it encompasses all of the teachings. So to achieve a very stable familiarization with this text is desirable because of these facts.
어제 다때네 가서 달랑이 침을 대용도 자기 사제 대용도 랑지 자와신년 대비 추당 때네 로제다장 림바스 랑지 자와신년 대비 추스 안에 가서 그래 신년 대주동 공고를 대용도 랑지 자와신년 대비 추스 신년 대주 안에 가서 대주주바 나로로 로드세 동을 진도와 어떻게 신년 대주 대도 와스 달랑정 그 가봐요 알았으나 주주들 대송 자와다다 대주 근류나라 고바점에 샤시때 안에 가서 로마서 보자 어제 달랑정 그 주주 중심도와 대송 자와다다 대주 근류나라 고바점에 샤시때 안에 가서 근류나라 고바점에 샤시때 로마서 상주에 그저 상주 란지 드마로도 세워서 되게 신년 대주 된도 거를 신년 대주 말봐 ngol sanje su teng do sanje nga su gegen res shenye den su teng do res.
When we look at the Lam Rinpoche, which the root text that this text is the root text of, we can see that that begins with guru devotion or devotion to the Lama, very similar to the foundation of all good qualities, or the source of all my good that we read where it says, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, etc. So we can see that in the Lam Rim teachings by Lama Tsongkhapa, it begins with guru devotion. So where in the Atisha's text can this be found? If in Lama Tsongkhapa's text he began with that. Here we find it in the first stanza where it says, I pay homage with great respect to the conquerors of the three times, to their teaching and to those who aspire to virtue. Urged by the good disciple Shanchu Uo, I shall illuminate the lamp for the path to enlightenment. So here, paying homage to the Buddha is very similar to the guru devotion, which can be found in the beginning of the Lam Rinpoche, because here the guru or the Lama that we're speaking of is the Buddha.
어제 아디샤 그 랑전진의 어때 두송 자와다는 두송 자와서 두송 상제 줄라고 그러고 두송 상제조 상제되는 아주 그게 너무 말이야. 그게 왔는 게다 상제 그 처음에 그게 뿌다버지 된 거래서 그게 뿌다 만대바이나 그게 로버트바이나 아니 그투들 랑 로버트 그래서 그게 개체 그래서 어제 랑지 자와신이 되면 주스 어때 해도 겁니다.
So here it says, I pay homage with great respect to the conquerors of the three times. And the conquerors of the three times here refer to the Buddhas of the three times. So this is the homage and the expression of Guru devotion at the beginning of this text, the lamp for the path to enlightenment. And Guru devotion is emphasized, and it's stated that the source of all good qualities, or the source of all my good, is my kind Lama, my Lord. Because if one has a wrong teacher, then he or she will go down a wrong path and will not be able to achieve the results that he or she desires. So having a teacher who can give an accurate or an authentic explanation of these texts or of these teachings is very important, because one must start with that root in order to understand the teachings.
어제 다드네 그래서 그래 신년 때문에 주기 신년들 간다 거라서나 아니 산제게 노아 거수 계신이 지송 요가레스 한 거수 지송 계신이 계신이 그네 지송 요가레스 단단 도대 거수 신년때 단단 가서 라랭 걸송데한테 도대네 시비 계신이 되서스.
So when we speak of spiritual friends or teacher, translators note Gewe Shenyan translates literally as spiritual friend. When we speak of spiritual friends, there are three different kinds of spiritual friends. There are teachers who teach the sutra, teachers who teach the Vinaya, and teachers who teach the Tantra. And we can say that this particular text falls into the sutra.
어제 다다나가서 도드제네 시비 신년들 추주된 고그레스 계신의 추주던 덴바 추주던 덴바기 추주된 게네 계신의 종소 나와데 되는 그레스 추주대 신년 두와 셔와 녀셔와스 라바송드레스 추딘지 라바 딩은지 라바 셔러지 라바송 아니 르가게 디바도 pombi 추딘 아니 돈이라면들 maybe 띵엔지 아니 셔럭을 하봐 송지 신년 두와 쇼와 녀쇼 너무 송도데 하봐 송도 인사 말이야 추주는 너무 송도 하봐 송도레스
Dodejen.
도대진.
So what kind of teacher must we look for? What is the kind of teacher and what qualities should that teacher have? It's explained in the Maitreya's Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, where it gives an explanation of the qualities that the teacher should have. And it begins with the three higher trainings. The teacher should have a foundation in ethics, have abandoned the misdeeds of the body, speech, and mind, and have very ethical behavior. The teacher should have great level of single-pointed concentration, and the teacher should have a wisdom, or a large amount of wisdom. Other sources state that they should just be familiar and stable in the Dharma, but this particular text gives a much more detailed explanation of what the teacher's qualities should be.
안에 전주드는 이로 전주 주시야 나오던 전주 주고 그래서 연된 라바 전지 안에 송지가리는 말봐 알니 갈래갈래 주는 말봐
The direct.
연된 라바 전지로 와 연된 라바스나 그툴레 연된 라바 주고 그래서 그툴레 연된 라바 말하나 그툴레 두고 말봐 그툴레 연된 라바 주고 그래서 전주 가서 그래 주시야 던들 전주 처분이 쓰고 공자당 최시야당 어떤 게 돌 전주야 보여지 전지 롱기 쇼스나 버차 뭐 시간 주고 그래서 롱기 쇼바 롱 도당 하다 대전의 때문에 뭐 시간 주고 그래서 롱기 쇼바스 아네 버차 뭐 시간 주고 그래서 전지 롱기 쇼 근데 로마를 써와요 희지 여기 주고 그래서 로마는 희지요 봐 지단이 주고 그래서 지단 해지면 지금 말이지 해지도 된바 조아봉 다더네 드네야 추니마 추초다 추초니마 디마무시고 바이나 당간 용사 말되는 칼리카군도서 어떤 매가지고 그래서 가디나 안에 가서 그래 강행을 줘도봐 조아봉도 가지고 그래서 지단이 조아봉한테 어디다비 추주된 질래 아니 그게 된고 그래서 또 들려와도 좀 버렸어
The J.
제 마드레 마소에
J lesson. Junior.
신이
토마니.
도와 셔와 녀셔와래 신이 도와 셔와 녀셔와 유된 라바 전지 농기슈 대니 러도도 마케데 대니 러도도 som어도 동반이 처음에 줘봐 있는 안 것도 뭐 대마도네 고아여 가지고 그래서 동문이 세계도 비지 땡데 예상 대바 마루 버레스 뭐네 비다버시나 안 것도 버레 대마셔봐 있나야 땡데 이미 주선지 대바 마루 번든지 임바레서 마지 고아여 가지고 그래서 하케 댄스나 아니 최마시도 두절 시켜봐 그래서 두절 시켜봐 두절 안준 로버지고 그래서 어디 최초다 내가 쇼소나 안 도되는 집에 계시니 생이 상버레스 그게 드리질 때는 해도 용 그래서 손에 인사래.
So there are 10 qualities altogether that the teacher should possess, beginning with the 3 higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. And then the teacher should have more qualities than the student, or higher qualities than the student has. If the student's qualities or understanding surpasses that of the teacher, then the teacher will not be able to truly help the student, and the student's qualities will not increase if the teacher's qualities are not greater than his or hers. So it's important that the teacher has more excellent qualities than the student. The next is that the teacher puts a great deal of effort into practice, teaching, meditation, and so forth, and studies. So it's important that the teacher has perseverance. The next is familiar with a vast amount of scripture, familiar with the texts and their commentaries, in the sutra and the tantra, familiar with sutra, familiar with tantra, familiar with all the various scriptures that give explanations of these topics. So the teacher should be familiar or very versed in scripture. The next, the teacher should have compassion and love for the students, and actually want to give the teachings to them because of that compassion and love. The next is never growing tired of giving explanations, whether it has to be done again and again and again, never growing tired or bored with giving the same exact explanation if it will be helpful for the student. The next is skilled in teaching. This isn't the actual order, but this is the order that was given by Rinpoche, so I'm just replicating it. The next is skilled in teaching. The teacher should be able to give explanations to the students in various ways so they will be able to understand what he or she is teaching. So they should be skilled in explanation or skilled in teaching. And the last is having seen emptiness. Now, the best type of teacher would be one who has had the direct experience with emptiness itself. But if they can rely upon reasoning and understand intellectually emptiness through using formulas such as the phenomena are not truly established because they dependently originate, and truly understanding what that means, then this is also suitable. But the earlier being who had seen emptiness directly would be the better choice of the two, but if one cannot find someone who has had that direct experience, then just an intellectual understanding in a very clear fashion would be enough. So those 10 qualities of ethics, concentration, wisdom, higher qualities than the student, effort, versed in large amounts of scripture, compassion, never getting tired of giving explanations, skilled in teaching, and familiarization with emptiness are the 10 qualities that are stated in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara by Maitreya that a teacher should possess.
어제 신이 어떤 그 신이 전이 상황이 때야도 개쳐버렸어. 안에 딱 계신이 때 계신이 그 안에 라세버 건가 녀고를 배서나 안에 계신이 가르치고 그랬다. 야. 가르자. 노안은 어떤 거 말은 노안은 캠베 주마인 밤 하나 도바샤고스. 계신이 그 초당마 뒤에 디바던데 아니 제스 라송나 제주요 말이지 보다 계신이 이나야 계신이 송바 이나야 그 디바제 근도스 디바제 거레스 아니 소주 마진랜다 어떤 제고스 라와 이나 제주요 말이스 캠베 주마인 밤만 도바샤우스 캠베 최당마 뒤에 아니 그게 그때 송고 이나 때 제주요 말이지 보다
The Yanjasranam, the Chekashin, the Saboyama.
그게 다 그게 그 라식가 켈냐고 맨로선 도가지바이나 라식가 따게 제고레스 그게 그 라야 최던 튜바린도나 켈네 최던 마 튜발라나 안에 그게 그 라바이나 대 제주요 말레스 그나 수주 샤디지 수수 라바이나 그게 그 라바이나 어때 수주죠 말이지 그게 그 라네 수주죠 말레스 캠비 주 많이 보면 도바샤고 최던 마 튜바든 그게 라군도나 대 제주요 말이지
Sapo. So one should rely upon the teacher, but this does not mean that if the teacher is giving an explanation of something or asking you to do something that goes against the Dharma, that one should carry that out. So it's necessary to be familiar with the scriptures yourself to be able to be clear on advice given to you. So it's important not to just follow anything that the teacher says to do. For instance, if a teacher were to say, please go kill this bird, killing is what is to be abandoned according to the Buddha. So this advice should not be followed because it is contradictory to the Dharma itself.
어제 단도대 가서 게이주는 튜바쇼라 마게이주는 튜바쇼도스 게이주 그게 거와 간데 제기나 된나지 수수 제워레스 그게 디바 제기도나 된나지 제주요 말이지 보다 게이주는 튜바쇼라 마게이주는 튜바쇼도스.
So it's important to heed advice given which will allow one to accumulate virtue or which is a virtuous activity according to scripture. So heed that advice and disregard advice that is contradictory to scripture. It's necessary to be very careful and when taking advice from the teacher, him or herself.
어제 당하 거서 리바이나 메뉴난 치기잖스 다 그게 그 디바 제주사라도 던들라바이나 아니 또 내용사 말해서 그게 고마 마사로 소리스 라고 내용사 말해서 라고스
Then the
tantra gozo 아니 그게 디바 제야다 어던게 소소고 마투바던 송바이나 아니 내용사 말에 고마 마사로 지스 그게 주고레스.
So if there is a specific activity that you were asked to carry out and you cannot do it, and you can find this in the tantric teachings, it's okay to go to the teacher and say, I'm very sorry, but I won't be able to carry out that deed because of, and then give the explanation of the reason why. So one can find in the tantric texts this explanation where it's okay to go back to the teacher and explain why certain things can't be carried out. Ngapju, the nala. Yeah, they can be found in the 50 verses on Guru devotion.
다든에 기신이도 싸와시고 시부중 볼랬더니 랑그 싸와래서 신이도 시다 템바도 개체버도 송도가 가르쳐서 올마 집을 중요 줄려고 하래 링기 줄려고 하래 집을 준비 줄려고 하래서 도속 걸로 시내마 시도게 그게 개체버래서 시도게 그게 맞으나 집을 중요 줄단 링기 줄다 집이 줄도서 안에 로마 저마지 시야용고 말해서 대인소서 대시행 그 신이 대학 개체버래서.
The most important thing, though, is that a teacher is able to give an explanation of the entire path. that the teacher is able to say, this is the teaching shared in common with the small scope. Give a very clear explanation of the small scope. Then this is the meaning of the medium scope. This is the meaning of the great scope. And be able to give a very detailed, clear explanation of the stages of the path through those three types of scopes, so that the student can progress along the path. If the teacher isn't able to explain these various levels of capacity or scope, then the student won't be able to traverse those stages and won't be able to understand the practices necessary in order to achieve realization. So it's necessary, and the most necessary and most important, that the teacher can teach you the entire path.
어제 다드는 아주 시당 제바이네 하다드 칼라지 두술 게게 뷰다부 고도 와서 인치 게게다 세리 게게다 제러 게게 뷰다부 고도 와서 그 뷰다부 맨날 데 그주 하다게 안에 서두네 주야부시고 뭐 게게 뷰다부 강갈 고도 와서 강갈로 게게 질된 고도 던다본다고 와서.
It's very similar to a college or school setting. We must rely upon a teacher to learn things. We need to have a teacher for English and history and the sciences and so forth. Without having a teacher, we wouldn't be able to understand these topics. So we can even see in this example of the school environment where the teacher is so important.
It's
very similar to this.
어젠들 도송 자와다다 뒤추서야 될 랑게 자와 신년된 비추서 랑리 전번에 신년된 수고 몸부질해도 어때 랑정고 어때 인사です.
So in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, you find the very large section on the guru devotion, or you find the you find a section on guru devotion, and Atisha condenses it into this first stanza just by paying homage to the conquerors of the three times. And implicitly, it means, guru devotion is contained within this stanza.
어제 다 랑지 자와 신년된 비추다 때는 로제다장 рем바스 사진이 받을래 때는 로제다장 렘바들래 제부 중고다 제부 중고다 도모를 하지레바 리다 도모를 하지레바 제부 준비랑 송도 어들래 송송 레옹고들
네 롱가레
랑지 자와 신년된 비추다 때는 로제다장 렘바스 게신년 때는 안에 라린 로종 가르치고 와서나 제부 중은 줄 로종 제고래 링이 줄 로종 제고래 제부 챔비 줄 로종 제하고 도송들 용서 말해
So here when we've explaining that we must find this teacher who can give explanations. The teacher needs to be able to give the explanation of the small scope, the medium scope, and the great scope. And the next part of this text, we find the explanation of the different scopes and so forth. So it's necessary to have this kind of teacher and see the teacher as the root of the path, so that the student can understand all the stages of that path.
다 제부송 제부디 제부송 어데 랑리 가서 그래 랑정기 죄제 쪼도 어떤 인사です제부총정기 총송 그 죄들래도 거res.
So in the lamp for the path to enlightenment, the different capacities are broken down, as said before, into three scopes: into the small scope, into the medium scope, and into the great scope. And an explanation of these scopes is given. A condensed explanation of these scopes is given.
다 제부 중원디 전부 송용고 제부서는 아주 강사 말을 강사 제부기도 보르카시바 뉴델란 주고 뉴바던데 뭐든지라 제부 가서 메사한다 어디 세진산도 제부로도 말을 제부로와 제부서나 아주 강사를 고고 그래서 제부 중원디 전부 서나 강사를 고는 그래서 제부 말을 제부들라 상로 리먼로 송요와서 제부 상로 중원 그리들 제부 중원 상로 딘즈 요견들 제부디 상로 처부여야 되겠는데 제부 전부 강사 그리면서 송용고 어디.
So when we look at the Tibetan Jipo this is referring to a being or a person. And sum means three. So beings of three scopes or three capacities. So here, this refers to the capacity that that type of person has relative to the Dharma. So there are those who have a small, those types of people who have a small kind of capacity or are comfortable within that small scope. And then there are beings who are comfortable within the medium scope, and then beings who are comfortable within the great scope. So the reason that it says there are three kinds of persons, or is because there are three levels that people can have relative to their capacity.
다 제부 종어서게 다 what 주산들이 뭐라 제부 종어서게 되게 가르쳐 거래 그 녀송고 동el 가봐요 말이스 녀송고 동el 막아봐지 녀송고 동el 지지 따네 내가 하다메 녀송고 동el 바오네 녀송고 동el 까데 아니 내가 하다 대화 장쇼나 안디사제 상바 상로 요두 제부 종어 있었어 말이야.
When we speak of the small scope, or the small persons or beings of small capacity, this refers to a being who wishes to abandon or be free from the three lower realms and finds that it's enough and is satisfied with the higher realms existence. So here she is satisfied with rebirth as a human or God and does not look any further than that. This is a type of person who just wishes to not have to experience the suffering of the lower realms and finds delight in the pleasant experiences of the higher realms and devotes all effort to being able to achieve a rebirth into the higher realms.
어제 다 제분들이 가지고 그래 다 등아주 내손을 타는 하다 멀리 제바 이나야 하다 멀리 대범도 제동에 가이동에 나이동에 동해지동에 주유동에 차번 유지동에 하다 멀리 안도스 어 텔레 내반존에 내가 안에 코알은 내반존에 구유동에 코알은 내반존에 내가 타바장 돈 나냐면 상로도 여기 거데 제분들이 있었어 제분들이 대매봐.
Then there's the type of being who notices the downfalls of even the higher realms. This type of being recognizes that even gods and humans have to experience the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, the pervasive compounded suffering, the suffering of birth, the suffering of aging, the suffering of sickness, the suffering of death. So then this type of person sees the downfalls of even the higher realms and then achieves the desire to definitely get out, which is the literal translation of Nepar Jonwa, or renunciation is another, but the more literal is to definitely get out or definitely arise from. So this person desires to emerge or to definitely get out of cyclic existence and wishes to achieve liberation. So what this being renounces is cyclic existence in all six realms. And this type of person is called a person of medium capacity. This type of person wishes to be free for him or herself alone from the six realms of cyclic existence.
어제 다드네 제부 중원진 전부 송드레스 송자고야도 간사가 상로리므로 송여도 송레스 다 안에 다 수수수수기 전이가 제부 중원이 된다 가르 니기 된다 가르 집이 된다 가르서나 드네 가사 다다 전이라서 다드네 란도 드마 도카돌 고들러나 말바 중원진당 중주비 제부 송도 시바샤서야 되게 제부들라 송요아래서 어드레스
Yere chung okay yere chungo drindan choju
제부 송도 시바샤서 어떻게 제부들라 송요래 제부다.
So the second stanza here, it says, understand that there are three kinds of persons. So this is what it's referring to. So just going back, we went over the small scope and the medium scope, etc. And then we would move on to the great scope. But we're going to now delve into the text. So Rinpoche just said that instead of explaining further, we're going to get into the text itself. So here, it says, understand that there are three kinds of persons, and then what those three kinds of persons, or what kind of qualities those three types of persons have, will be explained as we move through the text.
제부 중요 체니 링기 체니 제부 준비 체니 들은 걸로 대다 체니 러세 수수이 저와샤스 제부 중요 체니다 링기 체니다 제부 체니 들은 거든 마송이 있어 두송도 있어래.
So it says, understand there are three kinds of persons. Because of their small, middling, and supreme capacities, I shall write clearly distinguishing their individual characteristics. So here, the meaning is that Atisha will explain what is the definition and the meaning of a person of small capacity. What is the definition of and the meaning of a person of medium capacity? What is the definition of and the meaning of a person of great capacity? So here, this is the promise to explain the various qualities that each of those types of beings have, or the nature of those three types of beings.
다드네 수수이 저와자 다드네마 강지 터는 강다게 쿠유도와 장달라라니 돈이 제바 제부든 타마시스 대 제부 중국 전이 어디 된 버스 제부 중국 전이 당 아주 지당 전이 되면 강지 전이 서고다 아주 가도그 전이 다분이셔서다 제부 중국 다분이셔 어디 된 거서래 강지 터는 강다게 어떻게 제부 중국 전이 된 거스.
Know that those who, by whatever means, seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of cyclic existence are persons of least capacity. So here, this is the definition of a person of least capacity. You might say, what is the definition of color? So it would be very similar to this. What is the definition of a person of small capacity? And here, the definition is that those who, by whatever means, seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of cyclic existence. So here, this is the defining factor, or this is the definition of a person of small capacity.
다 제부 중 강지 터는 강다게 쿠유도와 장달라라니 돈이 제바 제부든 타마시스 강지 터는 강다게 송도 제부 중어되게 안에 고 내송도 동el 가비요 말스 내송도 동el 타하게 되어요 말스 내송도 동el 타하게 더시지고 말스 내송도 동el 타하게 더 가려 말스나 네 렌데서 말베 렌데 먹이 주고 추진 송화를 되네 고 내송을 타네 던롤 하다말 도야 던롤 하다말 도야 더시지고 말스 말베 와더니 소장 내송도 동el 가서 내송도 동el 지시 짜네 내가 하다 미 대장장 토나냐 비상로 여기 줘로 간사 줘로 들집을 중고서 그랬어.
So going back to the being of small capacity, they seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of cyclic existence. So this type of being sees the downfalls of the lower realms and sees this as undesirable, or sees the lower realms as not pleasurable. So he or she then looks for a method to be able to be free from those lower realms, and looks for the method to achieve the rebirth into the higher realms. And that method is a concentration on karma and its effects, and the three types of ethics, Sutrim Sum.
어데 딱 가지고 먹이 주고 주대서 말고 그때 집을 중요를 나도 어때 말베로
Sutrim Sum가
딱한테 당아술 된데 시제네 아무도 대시에나 마도 롤고 말했어 어들 대시적인 있어 말베 다더네 가지고 다 집을 중요하게 되는 거 내반 종자대 네 내송고 동에들에서 지난에 사제게 와라나설 대바지 송자요 와르스 동에 대바 군요 대바 고denlande 대바 지송자요 와르스 집을 중요한 상로던 투비 동에 대바대 내송고 동에데 지금 중 내송고 동에도 맞죠 다투고 말이스 내송고 동에를 가고요 말이스 내송 동에를 내중고 상바지고 말이스 어때 지금 중국 상로로 돼 동에 대바데 내송고 동에들에서 말이야.
So, what is it that a person of small capacity renounces or definitely wishes to get out from? And this is the suffering of the lower realms, and it does not go further than that. So when we look at the Four Noble Truths, what is the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, and the path and the cessation for a person of small capacity? The truth of suffering is the suffering of the lower realms. So when we look at the Four Noble Truths, the first truth of suffering, according to a being of small capacity, is referring only to the lower realm suffering. And then the truth of origin is the origin or the causal factors for rebirth into the lower realms. And then the path would be the method to be free from the lower realms, and the cessation would be the abandonment of the potential for rebirth into the lower realms. So a person of small capacity looks at the Four Noble Truths in this way.
어제 다 저기 중국에 다그 동에 대바 쳐는 게 송구 동에 들에서 다 내송 동에 타지가 랑도 저기 중국 가는 녀선을 거르스나 아니 먹주 쩌르다 먹주 본 추팅다 니뭐 또지 성고는 샤당도 그걸로 저기 중국이 저기 중국 된 녀선을 거르스 말이야 내송 타지가 랑 저기 중국이 랑도 쇼스나 아니 저런지 네 렌데 먹주 본 추팅 다 또지 성고는 샤당 셰바도 그걸로 저기 중국 랑도 쳐들어서 말이야 랑된 거 쳐.
So the path that this person or this being of small capacity progresses is one that has a very strong emphasis on refuge, karma and its effects, purification or confession, utilization of the four opponent powers. So this being focuses, or this being of small capacity focuses on these things to solely to be free from rebirth into the lower realms.
다 집에 중국 근주 대마다 가르스나 내송 동에 내송 배지기 네바 먹어 줘대 아니 집에 중국 근주 대마다 그 말이야 내송 동에도 쭉 갈라되는 중앙에서나 아니 내송 배지기 레지 근주다 녀모비 근주라 되는 중앙에서 네바 먹어 줘다 듣고는 나지게 녀모바 어디서 갈로 근주 대마다 되는
So the second noble truth, the truth of origin, for this type of person refers to unethical behavior. The origin of the suffering into the lower realms is the unethical actions that person would engage in, and the afflictions. And let me try this again. The origin of this type of suffering, which is the suffering of rebirth into the lower realms, according to a person of small capacity, is unethical behavior. So this person then abandons the 10 non-virtues and understands karma and its effects, and looks at the afflictions and the karma as the causal factor for the rebirth into the lower realm, and abandons what's necessary so that that rebirth is not produced.
어제 다 집에 중국 타바드 가르스나 집에 중국 타바데로와 타바데 라다메이 구봉들에서 집에 라다메이 구봉 도서나 집에 중국 타바도 그래서 타바 인다마이 산당지레스 집에 중국 타바데레스.
So according to the small capacity, or a being of small capacity, liberation is actually the abandonment of the lower realms. So liberation for this type of person is rebirth into the higher realms of the humans or gods. So whether or not this really is liberation or not, it is for this type of person.
다 집에 중국에 대마시 집에 중국을 뛰어도 대마시스나 대마시도 가르스나 내송고 동에데 아니 집에 중국 동에 대마시 다 내송고 동에 그조 아니 레다 녀모바 디바 먹어 주다 듣고는 하지게 아니 녀모바도 그걸로 근조 대마시 되네 근조송라教孙주고네 렌데 가서 그래. 먹이 주는 거 추팅 어디서 집을 중을 나대 말বে. 안에 하다면 도서나 집을 중을 다 버렸어.
So going through all Four Noble Truths, we look at the truth of suffering. The truth of suffering for a being of small capacity is the rebirth into the lower realms. The truth of origin is the karma and afflictions and unethical behavior that produces rebirth into the lower realms. The truth of path refers to the practices of refuge and the law of cause and effect, or karma and its effects, and all of the other practices relative to that scope. And the cessation is the actual rebirth into the higher realms. So this is how a person of small capacity would view the Four Noble Truths.
어제 다 집을 지된 셔마 디 가자. 네바 지된 셔마 되니 줄로 정화다. 지된 셔마 디 터된 바스. 다 집을 중고 되게 대유된데 이제 뇌를 너네바 다리상시 녀가 질라랑 그로 춘데서는 지된 샤와군 빈바 샤와진도 도주네 인생군이 해블라 보고 어때 말에 집을 중고 되게 땅 가서 매일된 시작 싸워져 버렸어. 이제 뇌를 하버렸어. 어두산도 그거서 말বে. 대주 그것도 말বে.
So next, it's important to look at the leisure and endowments that this human form has. We see that it's more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So it's necessary at this stage then to contemplate the importance of this human form that we have taken on.
다 매일로 된 자와지보데 이징은 뭘 하베 매일로 된 자와지보데 안에 다른 가서 매일로 된 배제 제투바이나 매일로 된디 둘에 안에 하다메 대선 배제 제바이나야 가서 매일로 된 누바 요가레스 안에 타바투하게 가르제기나 다시 제네 매일로 된 누바 요가레 추 가르 주바이나 매일로 된 누바 요자 이징 누블 하버레스 안당고레스 말베.
So we need to think that this human form is more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, or of higher importance than a wish-fulfilling jewel. And the reason for this is that it's through this human basis that we are able to achieve the liberation of the small scope, of the rebirth into the humans and gods. It's through this human basis that we're able to achieve liberation for oneself alone. And it's through this human basis that we can achieve unsurpassable complete enlightenment, or Buddhahood. So this is the reason that it is stated the human form is more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, and we need to contemplate this and become familiar with this.
대답이 매일 되는데 녀바가와르지. 주의군에 녀바가와. 장지군에 녀바가와. 베이군에 녀바가와. 녀바 손주군에 녀바가와. 매일 되는 자와지부터 따바따바 가서 유마깔이 가버렸어. 다른 가서 또 야네. 근데 매일 되는 중발을 마도 안에 뒤서 몸을 가서 또 토야깔이 가버렸어. 녀바가와레스. 주주아깔이 가버렸어. 안에 빼자바이네 베이군에 녀바가와레. 장하게 차네 녀바가와레스.
So this human form that we possess at this moment is very difficult to obtain. It's very difficult to obtain, and there are three reasons that are given. The causes are difficult to create. There are various examples given of the difficulty of obtaining this human form. And then the numbers, an explanation of numbers is given, or the numbers of beings who are able to take this form. So the difficulty is explained in these three ways.
어제 다 주군이 가르치냐 봐 그래서는 추진 나바다베 지송와서 다 먹이 주고 추진 나를 맞으나요? 안에 먹이 주본 그 추진 뼈다베 주고 그래서 주들 말베 추진 나바다베 지송 아니 편안만 못하고 그래서 편안 점만에 참자 신도그 조시발을 때네 아니 가서 매일로 된 중요요 땅 안에 대답이 신도그 조시 추진 나바다바 편안 점만에 참자와 대답이 주소 송부대 창가와 인장 대답이 주대 안에 가서 갈리카베 인장 안에 대부 매일로 된 갈리카베 차용 거스 예바거스.
So this human basis is an actual effect, and if the causal factors for an effect are difficult, then the effect is difficult to achieve. So going to the first explanation that the causes are difficult, it's necessary to have a firm foundation in ethical behavior in order to achieve a human rebirth. It's necessary to make large aspirational prayers in order to achieve a human rebirth, and it's necessary to be familiar with and engage in the 6 perfections in order to achieve this human form. So this is why it is stated that the causes are difficult to create, because one must have these 3 factors in order to achieve a human form in the future.
다 추진데 매일된 투발라 추진데 대중의 된 투발라 추진 가르치는 거 그래. 가르치는 추진 거 그래서 제바이나 안에 령아 예송게 안에 쉐바 디바 송다 거와 송용 거 그래서 말베 뢰지 거와 뢰지 디바 나기 거와 나기 디바 이지 거와 이지 디바 송용 거 그래서 령아 예송게 디바들레 디바되긴 데바들레 안에 내송도 용 거 그래서 내송도 동에 소소 면대be ngso 동에 용도 거 그래서 령아 예송 거와들라 때네 소소 데비 하다 메이 대상 안에 하다 데미가드 메이 저와 용도 그래서 말베.
So looking at ethics, for instance, there are 3 types of ethics, and there are 3 types of the opposite of ethics, or non-virtue. So there are 3 types of virtue, being virtue created by the body, virtue created by the speech, and virtue created by the mind, and 10 types of those. And then there are 3 types of non-virtue, non-virtue of the body, non-virtue of the speech, and non-virtue of the mind. If one engages in non-virtuous activities through the body, speech, or mind, then this creates rebirth into the lower realms. If one engages in virtuous activities through the gates of the body, speech, and mind, then this produces rebirth into the higher realms.
어제 다 사지게 가서 델레 철론 뒤에는 그다 먹으려고 레지란 조송소스 다 레지고네 디바 레지고네 안에 소지바 마지막 레벨로 소비 안에 디바 소마르 레송 나기제 이지 송데 디바 먹고 조송 버스 말베 거와 레지 거와송 나기 거와제 이지 거와송데 거와주도 먹으죠 어디 송도 버스.
So there are 10 virtues and there are 10 non-virtues. There are 3 virtues of the body, 4 virtues of the speech, and 3 virtues of the mind. There are 3 non-virtues of the body, 4 non-virtues of the speech, and 3 non-virtues of the mind. So when we speak of the 10 non-virtues and the 10 virtues, this is what is being spoken of, starting with the virtues of the, starting with the virtues or the non-virtues of the body, which would either be killing or the abandonment of killing, stealing or the abandonment of stealing, or sexual misconduct or the abandonment of sexual misconduct, etc.
던데게 다 듣는 가서 뢰주고는 수제발 찾아봐이나 안에 뢰주고는 수제발들라 용원 조송송이 첨본딩이 정송이 와르스 송 첨부되게 녀와를 제고 와르스 딩게 예달 제는 와르스 종원 돈을 제거레스 소주 bombi 당가 소주는 리가 말에 소주가 가샤와이나 소주 bombi 거와들라 첨본딩이 정송이 와르스 첨빌 할제데스 딩게 안에 데미가드 말바 네 중국도 멀지는 거라서 원내주 원딩이 그래서.
So looking at an act of killing, for instance, killing is non-virtue and has 3 levels and 3 results relative to those 3 levels. And those 3 levels being the great level of killing, the medium level of killing, and the small level of killing. If one engages in the great level of killing, this produces rebirth into hell. If one engages in the medium level of killing, then this produces rebirth into the hungry ghost realm. And if one engages in the small level of killing, then this produces rebirth into the animal realm. And the same goes for virtues. If one creates a great level of virtue, it produces rebirth into the God's realm. If one creates a medium level of virtue, then this produces rebirth into the demigod's realm, and a small level of virtue produces rebirth into the human realm. So all of the virtues and non-virtues have various levels.
다번에 수제비 디바들 제보 송용거스 다비 제보 주퉁 제보 아니 나미진 제보 제보 카 송용거스 아니 수제비 아니 단데들 가종 거스나 아니 녀와다 예다다 돈룩이 네 수마르베 사자 조용거스 야 헬런 컨트리 마르베 서고르베
No, it's okay.
내송은 네 조용거스 아니 내송은 네 조용거스 마르베 다빈 제보 내송은 네지 나미가 제보들 가종 거 나미 제보 메일로 대다 메게 소도 조용거스 나미가 제보때 메일 소다 메일로 조용거스 하다 메일로 주둥근 제보들 가려요스나 쳔마라야 수조벌 가와 셰바 주둥 용화 주둥이 용화요스 쳔마라야 선들 수모버 제바이나 쳔마라 수제알 가부 용거스 도슈레스 그 가부 요좀 그 수제거스 아네 용화 주둥근 제보들 아네 멀리 제바이나 쳔통와 shimare shinreyade suju juthung reveres bugu chujo loju jenga lo chujung ko shinke momduwas wo tuzungalo nyonga juthung res kama me choto tong zoba yinza ane sosu choto tong chayong res.
So the effects of actions are three. There are fruitional effects, environmental effects, and causally concordant effects. So for instance, if one engages in killing, and it has all of those three factors, the great level of killing, then this would produce the rebirth into the hell realm. So the environmental effect would actually be the place which the being is having to dwell, or the hell, as Rinpoche just said in English, hell country. So the place in hell that the person would have to abide in is the actual environmental effect. The fruitional effect, for instance, of abandoning killing would be that one could take on a human form or a form into the higher realms and so forth. So this would be a fruitional effect of, say, abandoning killing. So the second type of result or effect. Causally concordant effects has two divisions, that being the behavioral causally concordant effect and the psychological causally concordant effect. So the, for instance, the psychological, did I get that right? Is it behavioral? Hold on one second. I know it's behavioral causally concordant effect. The cheek, the Jason, the NGK.
Nyuwa jitun ta tsandala so jeken yumayna tsashima dala ko tsatotong chaawad nyuwa jitun res ko magi tsatotong zuyo warwa den najin soso nyuwa na soso tsatotong chaawad nyuwa jitun res sheba jitun sana.
I think it's physical, let's say behavioral and physical. I'll explain the meanings of them and then yeah, there's a specific term for it, I've just forgotten. Of the two divisions of causally concordant effects. So we'll call one behavioral and we'll call the other one physical. So the behavioral causally concordant effect would be this: a child might be born and like to engage in killing. So the behavioral causally concordant effect of killing previously would be that that child would like killing and engage in it on a regular basis. The physical causally concordant effect of killing would be that the life would be shortened. One would have a short life. So these are the three kinds of results that can be applied to virtue or non-virtue. Yes, sir?
Cause and effect, does that end in heaven or heaven but in God or hell? Is there a way out of hell a way to fall from grace from the higher realm?
Yeah, it's impermanent. It's all the realms are impermanent.
Thank you.
But we can get into that in more depth maybe once the question and answer session comes. That's cool.
Yeah. Good. nga chosul ta mo she sa ba yi jibu chung chu de she de res de chung chu de ke che res de abu chung so na an kale kale ndin le res mar be.
So you can see at this center, I've always placed such a large emphasis on the topics within this small scope. And the reason for this is the medium scope cannot be produced without the small scope. So this is why I've placed so much emphasis on the small scope topics over the years.
다 수주변 제버들로 왔다 손도 됐나지 수주도 지금도 나 어떤 수 맞이서 봉샤바이나 수주비 추진이스 되게 제버들로 손용 그래서 말이야 단데들 가리요서나 사이 롱바다 매일 롱바도 단데를 다빈데고 근데 사제기 시간도 준지래 배월래 사제기 시간도 사이 롱바다 매일 롱바도 조용 그래서 다빈데고 되네 남에게 제버들 매일 요던 사이로 매기 수 더와던 도저 어디서 조용하래서 말이야. 되네 주팅 되버더니 용거로다. 소저 봉화를 가와. 채셔말 처리 용거로서. 롱라.
남행기 제포 그 신지가래.
남행 되버더 다 메드로 메들 하 남행 되버. 메들 하 유도 와 남행 되버스.
So looking at virtue, just once again, so that we're clear, there are three effects of a virtuous activity. There is the environmental effect, which would be, for instance, if one did engage in a virtuous activity, one would live in an environment that was very nice and have many enjoyments and have all the things that he or she needs or desires within that environment. The fruitional effect would be, as stated before, the human form itself that the being was able to take on. And the causally concordant behavioral effect would be that that being would like to abandon, for instance, if the virtue was the abandonment of killing, then the causally concordant behavioral effect would be that that child or that being would enjoy abandoning killing or would find great pleasure in not harming or killing other beings. And the physical causally concordant effect of abandoning killing would be that that being would have a long life.
어제 다더네 수주는 대부 송시바데 메고와 쪽은 걸로 지바레스 잡으레스 송송송 요아레스 내가 손을 집을에 지면이 대바치고 사고도 대바 조종되는 사바이네 용은 조종 상소나 아니 말 조당지당 바이네 녀와를 제가 조사하는 것도
So this formula of the three, though, it can be applied to all of the non-virtues and all of the virtues. So if one engages sutang, I just want to be clear. I'd like to make sure it's very literal. So if one, for instance, uses harsh words, the same exact formula can be applied to killing. So if, for instance, all the levels are present when one engages in harsh words, and the concluding factor of rejoicing in the fact that harsh words have been done is present, then this does still produce rebirth into the hell realms, just like the previous example. So the Buddha has stated that these misdeeds or non-virtues lead to these various results. But the Buddha has also stated that these can be purified. There is a method to purification.
코 다바마를 마다바레스 게지게지긴지네 아니 나도 셰하게 마다바들 해용거레스 델레네 데네 나송을 제하고 주도 대도여바이나 아니 나송을 주 창도여나 나송을 제거레스 나송을 제나 녀와 자녀게 동에 도서 아니 나소 가보요 말레스 아니 동에 도서 매바조하고 터시지도 말베
So this human form has so many qualities and is very difficult to obtain, but it is also easily lost because of the fact that it is impermanent. The time of death will come, and at that time, if the causes are present for one to be reborn into the lower realms, then he or she will be reborn into the lower realms. So we need to focus on the causal factors or the method that will free us in future lives from the lower realms. So there is a method, there are methods that we can utilize in order to be free from these unpleasant states.
다 집에 중앙 되게 시오등에 손을 제바이나 선들래 아니 가서 르롱 쇼부지이나야 아니 쇼부데 심한 그 도와요 말이지 타나 조비인지 대잔으로서 심한 배 도와요 말이지 심한 배야도 추르스 뭐 추르와 산던 거스.
So what is beneficial in the future life? Is money? No, money we can't bring, or wealth we cannot bring with us to our next life. At the time of death, that will be useless and will be that money will be gone, and the only thing that will be left are the actions that we engaged in. So it's very important to recognize this, and in the small scope, recognize that there are certain things to abandon in order to be free from the lower realms.
What the Tatashima Zubi Jane, Dibata Gawani, the Saint Nebat Nene, Saint the Joashamalma, and Drumbat and Drunhasaban Rojanda Wars, what the Joashamal, Ruagnes which she was.
And within our continuum, there is a mix of misdeeds, or non-virtue, and virtue that will give rise. But if one in this life was not mindful, if one in this life was careful to engage in the practices of this scope, then he or she will not be fearful at the time of death. He or she will just look at it as going to a new hotel, leaving an old hotel and going to a new hotel.
Ojita, Drunhan Dujaji, the Nindo, Nason Drunhan to the Yogaris, Dendun Drunhan to the Aboris, Dendun Drunhan to Tashi Waters.
So there are two kinds of hotels that we can go to. There are the hotels of the lower realms and the hotels of the higher realms, and we have in our hands the method to achieve the hotel of the higher realm, or achieve rebirth in the hotel of the higher realm.
어제 딱 가서 던두기 런한 로야게 다시 되는 건축송라 저선 루고네 렌데송아 네 주진송아도 중에서 말বে.
So if we wish to abide in the hotel in the higher realms, then we need to take refuge in the three jewels and familiarize ourselves with the law of cause and effect, or karma and its effects, or action and its results.
대답이 집에 중요히 줘도 세발라 저왕 하마 여바다 심마 저왕 하시 여바도 때제 고아 마샤바 이나 칼레가 말베스 what she was.
So at the small scope, though, it's necessary to understand that there is a past life and that there is a future life. If one does not understand this and believe in past and future lives, even the small scope realizations are not possible.
어제 다데네 디바도스 메바조야 니부 도지 상이고네 샤당시 주가 내고도스.
So what is the method in order to purify misdeeds? The Nepo Doje Lobsang Lobsang.
도지 상이고네 디바샤도 야바 쉐고르스. 도지 쉐고네 디바샤기나 안 디바다요르스. 던두노한도르스.
So if we can purify our misdeeds and engage in things such as confession, and applying the four opponent powers, then we will be able to go live in the hotels of the higher realms.
디바데 샤당 제마투바 이나 디바데 데네 케바 모몰로바 인 디바코 르르르고 말라고 말스 쿠친도 티온도 양 데부토 용고스 라라 랭가 요린 르레장 데베 양단 종 리바지스 디바데 샤당 마지바 이나 디바 조조지나 생갈 내네 제와 샤마샤마샤마 데발 첸도 티온도 동네 용고스.
So if one has engaged in misdeeds or non-virtue and does not purify those misdeeds or non-virtue, they will always give rise to suffering of some sort. If an unpurified deed is not lost, it is stated that if an action is engaged in and it is that of the non-virtuous sort, and the purification has not been applied, then whether it is in this life or many kalpas later, the experience of the result of that non-virtue will happen. So it's been stated that one will always have to experience the results of non-virtuous activities that have not been purified, and those results will always be suffering.
디바데 다가 터질 디바들 디바사사바들 줘바제 워레스 신징에 제게냐 디바드 제게면 냐비 동생 구그레스 말바 디바사사바들 줘바제 아니 신징에 때 제게면 로지지 가두이나 제게면 로지 제게면 다와지 제게면 샤브지니 루초저지니네요 제게면 냐비 동생 토네 때네 Never good to be taught to see in the Tibetan, Marbe. And the Tonshandoya, Bezasa to Daya, then the Kusun to Tenjia, Lagan Sabajia, Oya, that the Nekare,
Tenchido.
Tenjito, Tenshachu Sangoya, Janduja, Otuzina, Dibatagus.
So, how does one purify the misdeeds? There is a practice called the Four Opponent Powers. The first of the four opponent powers is the power of regret. It's recognizing that one has engaged in a negativity or engaged in non-virtue and regretting having committed that act. Recognizing that it was a faulty act and regretting having done so. The next is making the power of commitment. Making some sort of commitment to not engage in that sort of activity again. And one can make that commitment for the rest of his or her life, or it can be for 1 month, or it can be for 1 week, or it can be for 1 day, for 1 hour, for 1 minute. So it's making a commitment, a realistic commitment to not engage in that sort of activity for a asserted length of time. The next is the power of antidote, or power of actual opponent. And this is applying an antidote to the misdeed that has been engaged in. Applying antidotes such as reciting the 100-syllable mantra or various other name mantras, reciting the Sutra of the Three Heaps, the Bodhisattva Confession of Downfalls, the 35 Buddhas of Confession, building new temples, constructing statues, doing various sutra and tantric prayers, meditation upon emptiness. All of these things fall into the category of the power of antidote. And then the last is the power of basis. And the power of basis refers to the basis of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, or bodhicitta, and refuge.
어떤 디바 저부터 걸 다도 그랬어. 추지던 데나 처음에 방가야 디바 인생 한번 마고스. 처음에가 저거 다도 그래 사지 송요 그랬어.
It's been stated by Buddha that there are no non-virtues that cannot be purified. Even the 5 heinous crimes can be purified. Killing one's mother, killing one's father, killing an arhat, drawing blood from a Buddha, dividing the Sangha. So any of these 5, even these 5 heinous crimes can be purified.
So
it's good then if we can think, oh, there is a way to purify these misdeeds, and believe that it is possible, and engage in the confessions.
디바 두자시라르 디바를 윤내지 요아르스 샤나진나 다요바 디바가 윤내레스.
So the misdeeds or non-virtue are very bad, and there is only one good quality that a non-virtue has, and that good quality is that it can be purified.
다 디바 다겐서 좀 버렸어. 디바이나 아는 거블로도 시비티 거서 디바 다비 뻔모무송 안구를 말라로 소바 어떤 게 뻔모무송 요레스.
Who has purified their misdeeds? And examples can be found in the great master Nagarjuna's letter to a friend. where the example of Angumala is given, and various other examples.
그쪽에 디바 다 요나는 가서 디바 다 매바 요말 가서 다 요아레스.
So if they can purify their misdeeds, then of course we can purify ours.
근데 디바 다비 다 간데시 디바 다바도 간데시 쉐그르스나 말랑 다세는 요거라서 말랑 차 담보니바 송바 조부 드버지 차 담보니바 송바 들레 안지 칼라피다버사야
Lesso.
안에 라마단지야 르토멀자야 추저야 어디 녀마샤와라 소바 근데 녀랑 대소나 안에 셀 가비 좀 디바다고 요서레스.
How does one know if there has been a purification? And the way that one can tell is by looking for various signs in dreams. And there are three levels, or three periods of time during the dream state. The first period of time, which is the beginning of the sleep state, the middle of the sleep state, and the end of the sleep state. And the dreams that happen in the first two parts of these sleep states are not to be analyzed. But the third period of sleep is when one can analyze the dreams and see if various signs are present of purification. Some of the signs that you might see in a dream is encountering lamas or teachers, seeing monks and nuns, mounting a horse or an elephant, eating good food, drinking good drinks, seeing the sun rise or the sun shining, feeling good. So these are various signs that we can see in our dreams that a purification has taken place.
어제 다 사지 해봐나 버렸어. 안에 가서 동에 저도 준이 상하고는 사지를 쪄순로 사지도 해봐나 사지를 쪄순로 사지를 쪄순로 장제가 송고 동을 다 깔리카 버렸어. 사지가 송샤비 최도 해나 버렸어. 되냐래 제나 안 동을 주는 그랬어. 다달 쪄순로네 다달 되샤비 해드사나 나서 타고도 왔어. 다달 쪄순로 해마잔 타고도 왔어. 된다고 인사했어.
So we look at the Buddha as a doctor. But we know if we go to a doctor and we don't take what is prescribed by that doctor, then their illness cannot be eradicated. So we can take refuge, have the two causal factors for refuge of fear and faith, go for refuge to the Buddha, see Buddha as a doctor. But if we do not engage in the practices that are prescribed by the Buddha, then we will not be able to achieve the results that we desire. So if we are looking at the small scope, for instance, if we don't abandon the things needed to, we need to abandon and adhere to the things necessary to adhere to within the small scope, then we will not be able to be free from the suffering of the lower realms. Just like our illness would not be eradicated if we did not take the medicine prescribed by a doctor. So refuge itself is not enough.
어제는 대송도 신내년 rum지 디메지 디지저 공주송도 대시 정도 신도 땜바 디 하자냐바 매바샤 대양 가나레데 레선네 랑도 추진로라라레소스 안에 신내 가서 내송을 뭐지 디요 말스 내송을 제시그다스 디지저 내송을 저대 공주송레스 공주송라 정도 아버지고레스 공주송라 정도 아버지고레 저선 로아 단제 등나송 동에 자갈이 가버다스 공주송라 저선 로이고네 마기 좀 고치네 렌데 아버송고레스 오 대송고도 지금 저것도 내 집에 좋은 가도로 어때
Geshe Rinpoche, the Lamrim Dudun.
두든
So in Lama Tsongkhapa's abbreviated stages of the path, Lamrim Dudun, I believe that, is that what it's called in English? Abbreviated stages of the path? The Lamrim Dudun, it's stated that the time of death is uncertain and the negative actions will produce rebirth into the three lower realms, and there is one protection against this. This is not a literal, but this Rinpoche's commentary on the quote itself. The protection against the fears of the lower realms is having a very stable and firm refuge. So it's stated in the Lamrim Dudun that it's necessary to have a stable and firm refuge in order to be free from the sufferings of the lower realms.
어, 되네 가서 jundu doji song ten ba ches doji song gona shaden to kadu in the ches jermi jodu chungu kadu lo to song duas.
So, and also Geshe Rinpoche explains the importance of applying these four opponents whenever negativity has been created. So we can find all of these things in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, and also in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand by Pabunka Rinpoche. So all of these things can be found in the Lamrim texts. So you're able to read about the small scope in English, or the being of small capacity. So we're only going to be able to give an abbreviated explanation, or condensed explanation. So you look at the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, then you look at the Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, and you look both back and forth, and you will start to understand more and more. So there's many cassettes by the Dalai Lama, and if you can listen to those will also be helpful. You'll understand it have a very firm understanding of these things then. So if we slowly practice these things, then the center members will understand the Dharma more and more. So if we can understand very firmly real Buddhism, then this is important, the real Buddha Dharma. If we don't rely upon reason and don't rely upon these things, then the higher understandings are quite impossible. So once again, when we look at the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, the truth of cessation, and the truth of path, and relate it to the being of small capacity, the truth of suffering is the suffering of the lower realms, the truth of origin is the karma and afflictions that produce the suffering, the truth of cessation is rebirth into the higher realms of gods and humans, and the truth of path is familiarization with karma and its effects, or action and its effects, and refuge. Excuse me. So for this being of small capacity, rebirth into the higher realms is considered liberation. But we can't say that it's complete liberation, because liberation itself is not impermanent, and the state in the higher realms is impermanent. So, and to say whether it's a truth path is quite difficult as well, because there's no renunciation involved, complete renunciation involved. So, but there is a renunciation of the lower realms. But it's beneficial. So if we can understand this firmly, then we'll be able to develop renunciation, or the desire to definitely get out in the future. So maybe we have about 25 minutes. We'll do some question and answer, and then the dedications and so forth. We're trying to stay right on the time, because it is every week. We're trying to stay right on the time so Rinpoche can get lunch and so forth. So maybe some questions?
You mentioned, Rinpoche mentioned the method, the purification with confession? What are the methods of confession?
Okay, let me just clear this up as far as English goes. Confession refers to it's a tricky word in English because confession in the Tibetan Buddhist sense is a little different than confession in, Catholic,
Like
Acknowledgement, yeah, is probably a better
bringing
word.
into consciousness that through countless lives, through your misdeeds, you've created this.
Right, so it's more of an acknowledgement of misdeeds created than, and then the application of the four opponent powers. It's not really confession per se, like in the Christian sense. So the reason I answered that is because it might be an English problem and not really something that could be cleared up by Rinpoche because he's not familiar with the English language. Does that answer it?
Yes.
I can get more complete answer if it doesn't. Okay.
Because there is the text too that's published in many places as well, the actual prayers that use. There's several good translations of it.
Yeah. So it's like Doug said, that's a really good acknowledgement instead of confession. Yes.
You spoke of how the small capacity
Uh-huh.
relation was rebirth into the higher realms.
Uh-huh.
Is that wrong view?
The Jipo Chungo, the Goden, La Dang Mi, the Luta Yimba, Kongi Chiwa, Dangin Sena, the Goden Yomari.
제부 중국 고대 많이 쓴데 그랬어. shiribun 고대 많이. 제부 중국 고대 많이.
So it's okay to say that it is a liberation according to the small scope, but it's not a liberation according to the other scopes. So we could have non-Buddhist, for instance, who would feel that there is a liberation, but it would be a liberation for them, but it wouldn't be a true liberation in the sense of the other scopes.
다 전도던 렌데도 제부 중국 주레스. 이나 제부 상주 선바수가 냐선래 그랬어. 총고도 도모와서 오더레스. 상주 선바서 전도 냐선은 제그래 안에 렌데 송그래 안에 제부 중국도 도모와레스. 제부 중국 나로 지보 하다메 대서 도 나냐고 상루요레스. 상주 선바를 던데요 말.
So when we look at the small scope itself, the small scope, the ideas of refuge and the understanding of action and its results, even bodhisattvas have to engage in those practices as well. So this is why it's called teaching shared in common with beings of the small capacity, because the other scopes also utilize these practices. The difference is that the great scope would never be satisfied with a rebirth into the higher realms. So it's just the actual motivations or reason for doing the practices that is different. But the actual practices themselves must be adhered to by all beings, or all beings of all capacities, to achieve the final goal of Buddhahood.
Okay.
Yes.
Three-part question. Can you purify past actions in this life? Actions you may have done when you were a small child, and also can you purify actions in previous lives?
Okay, so can you purify actions in this, like you did something wrong and you want to purify it, and then you probably did something wrong in the past life and you want to purify it. Is that okay? Kongichiwa, the say the Deepa Sama, then Deepa da Tugudue. Say de.
Deepa Shana Jena da Tugudue.
Then say Ngama, the Deepa the Sana, Deepa da Tugudue.
Ngama Jiwa Toma Meban, Deepa Mobasasha Yore, Deepa Tabis Jondu Jia, Tongshan Duna Tanuris.
So yes, absolutely, one can purify in the same fashion as stated before. If one engages in a misdeed of this life, then one can apply the formula that was just given to purify that. One can say, I, since beginningless time, have engaged in non-virtuous activities, and I wish to confess them or acknowledge those things, and then purify those as well. So misdeeds or non-virtues created in this life or in previous lives can all be purified. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
And the third too.
And the third?
Thank you.
Okay.
딱 아주 창상 집의 용어도 창상 동해 용어도 왔어. 그 주도 생각할 때 동해가 누바다. 동해 전에 누바다. 그와 전에 누바 요디 창상 아니 동해 먼저네 동해 용어도 왔어. 창상 집의 용어도 그저 나로 요더스.
So sometimes we have to experience an unpleasant state. Sometimes we experience a very pleasant state. And that's because within our mental continuum, there are seeds that have the potential to give rise to both of those states. And whenever the conditions are present for those to ripen, then we have to experience those states. So we have non-virtuous seeds that give rise to unhappiness within our continuum. And we have virtuous seeds which give rise to happiness within our continuum. So this is why we experience these different states, because we have seeds within our continuum which can produce those different states. Yes?
Okay.
Two questions. One is about the subject of abortion. We were talking about killing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I just want to understand, I think it's difficult, very difficult for women who have, because they've had to kill a baby, but when is the time that, according to Buddhist philosophy, that this is actually killing a human being?
When is conception?
When does it become killing?
I don't know how to say it. Okay, this is just going to take...
Before the being becomes even a being.
Okay. The Arinala and such agenda that sansan the pumo pugo yere and segudu. The hakosune. Sansan the pugo segudu. The pugo ropo machena machetuna and sansan segudu. Then gadu deepa sagadu. Gadu. The gadu kansa yere. Suchupa gadu.
소주바 보고 드세네 보고 드셔서는 소주 레 종르스
Then a gadu.
뭐 맞아봐.
Gangin sena the trua the Chenrezig the
마마르라고.
me mare the tambo the lapa then limba then the yongudu ngama the tamche mena then me mayen nambichu that's kakare.
다 체리 바왔던 게 상로 요인지를 남바 제나네 뭐 맞아봐서 노안네 코아 가면 나로를 쉐바도 쇼타도 그 말에도 와르스 감바다 라바 요 마르스도 kudodo juye wote meba zune meseveres mechaba meba zune meseveres chasan yekend meba zune meseveres mes deva sagars duan songres.
It's been stated in the Vinaya that no matter that once the moment happens where the consciousness leaves the bardo and enters into the womb of the female, at that moment of conception, there is a human being there, according to Buddhism. At the moment that the consciousness goes from bardo into here, then we have a human being. It's not necessary for the arms and legs and so forth to develop to say that there is a human being there. So the moment that human being is killed and dies, the moment that being dies, killing has taken place.
We don't really know when that being exists if we don't know that the being has consciousness.
Well, the moment of conception is
the
moment of
continuum of consciousness entering a new incarnation.
Right.
It's the 12th.
Right.
The 12th stage of divine horizon.
Exactly.
What the book dominant book macha was cha sadu to members on the massive
It's important if there is a baby in someone's stomach that they take care of it and do not harm it, because misdeeds are created in harming.
나도 강반 분나 용바에는 뭐고 마용건 된 도도 전에 하고 무슨 뭐 레사도 도전은 먹고 싶는 건 누웠어.
The tamche busegdo. The tambo the busegdo.
뭐 요나 세고 덴버 마용건 전은 되는 거 용고 말이야.
So, for instance, if if there's a certain kind of spray you can put down so that bugs don't come into your house, and it doesn't kill them, it just it keeps them, I don't know where the spray is, but it keeps them from coming in the house. If you kill repellent. Oh, that's true, like a repellent.
Just repels them.
Right. So is there a spray, though, you can do your whole house with so that it doesn't... Okay, so there's an insect, thank you, insect repellent keeps the bugs from coming. And this isn't actually considered killing. But if you spray poison on the bug, then this is actually considered killing. So it's creating the factors for the bugs not to come in the first place would be the best way to not have the bugs, because once you apply a poison or something, you have killed.
So use baby repellent.
Birth control.
다이나 대상은 최적의 아버로 보고 제멜 보고 제마도 보이는 항상 아버지 당을 내는
These days, it seems like having a child is much easier because they can even do a cesarean section to take the child out. They have all of these machines.
그만 가서로 말 때는 저거 가게 요 말이죠. 보고 숨을 지지 가지지나 라와레 마두지 제 주고 마시 시간 요 말이죠. 대상 자게 보고 마산지를 숨어도 제 주고 말이죠. 지지 숨을 쳐봐자 그랬을 때. 아.
Got it.
대상 자로 봤네. 제메를 보고 숨어도 제 주고 뭐. 숨어도 제 주고 말이죠. 옛날 보고 저거 가고 있는 제 제거지로다.
Jigu got it.
보고 제하면 봐주는데 발라. 자제바 이나 감해서 그는 강시.
네.
아는 게만 맨사요 말에 보고 가지지는 맞아 문유유르스다 문유유. 가실 무슨 가실 보고 뒤지 그러여스. 가실 안 제메 보고 저 마토는 쉐아랑 그래서 마토 해요 말 자주야.
So in the past, many mothers have had to die because they didn't have the scientific methods to to remove the child from the woman's body. Now we can see that people could even have 7 children at once or 5 children at once, and they're saying that the population of the world is increasing, and I believe it's because of the advances we've made scientifically that the population can increase, because before so many mothers died in childbirth because they didn't have the right medicine or machines or methods to remove the child from the womb. So now, just 3 babies, for instance, in the past, being born would have been a major accomplishment. Now, so many could be born because of the methods that we have. The science has been so beneficial. Yes, one more question, and then we'll. Long, short.
Birth control is considered a repellent, or is it considered killing?
The Arila, the May sana, pugo yongomare, the suchuba yomare.
아버님이 매사는 보고 매사는 보고 자고 말어. 든 비지 디바이지만 돼야 쉬었어.
Yeah, this is not misdeed. This is the best to take birth control.
So it's like repellent for the
Right, exactly.
sperm.
보고 자자도 매사도 보고 세르스네.
Yine the me sana pugo yongomare, the segamare, yongomare, yontugamare. He said, but if you take a medicine to kill the baby, then this is killing. But if preventive measure is not killing. The Hua. So maybe we'll do the dedication of merit and so forth.
Mandal.
Oh, mandala offering and then the dedications. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient living beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalagam Niradayami. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise to Mantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Jambe Bawu Jeta Jen Badam Kondu Zambo Deyan Lejinde Deda Kunji Jesu Daloji Gewa Deda Tanje Radungo Duzum Jebe Gewa Tanje Ji Ngowa Ganla Jodu Ngabade Dajen Gewe Tsawa Dekunjang Sampo Chuchi Radungo. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, the source of all happiness and help for beings is Tenzin Gyatso, Chenrezig in person. May his life be secure for hundreds of kalpas. Amri Rawing Oe Jinyam Dir Benon Dewa Malun Joe Ne Chenrezig Wan Tenzin Yadoyi Jabezide Bandu I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Lodon Zambo The light of your wisdom dispels the darkness obscuring the 5 scriptures. You joyously uphold the sublime teachings of Sutra and Tantra through the 3 doors. Through constantly applied perseverance, you have perfected learning and reflection. May Venerable Geshe Lharampa remain for a long time. Lo nu je shomar mun badze gambe ngozum donga dan juzin dan yun zun run du zam daru jin Geshe Lharampa yun rin sham den jo. Rinpoche, the Sani Shugeng Apo, the Techen Sojung Dumba. So tomorrow, just to remind people, we're doing the Mahayana one-day vow. This is a vow that you take for 24 hours. Various things within the vow. If you want to know what the whole vow is, you can find it online, or we can explain it maybe after. It's basically just for 24 hours. No killing, no stealing, no lying, no intercourse. Not using new special jewelry or perfuming or anointing yourself, not sitting on high thrones, and not eating other than one meal at lunchtime, not eating breakfast, not eating dinner. So these are the vows that you take when you do the Mahayana one-day vow, and it's held from when the sun starts to come up the morning you take the vow, and when it comes up the next day, the vow is finished. And I believe Rinpoche is giving refuge vows also tomorrow.
And it has the motivation to benefit all sentient beings.
Right.
That's what makes it Mahayana.
Right. The Mahayana is different than the regular one-day vow in the Vinaya, because it's got the bodhicitta aspiration connected to it.
That happens here?
5 a.m. tomorrow morning. Yep. So if you can, please come.
And refraining from eating afternoon, does that include liquid?
You can drink liquid, but no foods. But don't take all your food and put it in a blender and drink.
You thought of that, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's like
Right.
no milk.
Yeah, no garlic, no black foods.
Right, no.
So I think that we're done. If anybody wants to come up and say hello before we conclude.